Welcome back, everyone, to another week, another episode of Interventions and Detentions. It's where the real learning begins, don't you know? I'm your host, Brad, and thank you again for tuning in this week and coming back for another visit, another table talk. You know, if you tuned in last week and you caught episode 210, you know it was a tough one for me. It was a tribute to my dad. It's been a rough couple of weeks, but we're hanging in there, and it was just an episode I felt called to do. I just felt like I needed to share some personal, emotional, and honestly, some healing. And, you know, just coming out of that, I kept thinking about the people who shape us and the adults who make the difference. And that's kind of where that whole episode was led to. So I hope you had a chance to listen to it. It was probably my deepest, most honest conversation having with you guys about a man that I truly loved, and he truly loved his family and his community and gave everything that he had to all of us. So today we're going to flip that script a little bit. We're going to talk about a lot about student behavior, but also we're going to talk about our behavior, the adults in the room, because if we're being real, the way that we show up every day changes everything, and it has an effect on kids. This episode's about reflection, not perfection. It's about how our tone, our consistency, and emotional regulation set the stage for the culture that we're trying to build in our classrooms, in our schools, wherever we're at. So sit back, let's take a walk, and just take it easy. Let's talk about the adults in the room. Let's start here and think about this for just a moment. Students reflect the energy that we bring, we the adults. So when I walk into a classroom or the hallway or the cafeteria, the playground, wherever I'm at, I can tell within about 10 seconds what kind of energy is leading in that space. Is it calm? Is it chaotic? Checked out? Whatever it is usually mirrored by the adults. We're going to talk about that mirror effect. We like to say kids are just acting out when they're being bad, but often they're just reflecting what's being modeled to them, or at least at some point maybe during the day. There's a line I've heard: we teach twice, once through what we say and once through how we live. I love that. Let me repeat that again. We teach twice, once through what we say and once through how we live. And I remember early in my principal career walking into a room in the building I was in where a student was having a meltdown. You know, we see this quite often, unfortunately. It's just part of being a child. The teacher was frustrated, the class was restless, and I wasn't calm either. I came in hot. I was going to fix this situation right now, wanting to solve it fast. And you know what? I matched the energy in the room, unfortunately, and it made things worse. Later, I replayed that moment and thought, if I can't regulate myself, how can I expect the kid to be regulated? It was kind of an aha awakening moment for me. You know, since then, I've learned that leadership, whether it's, you know, you being a teacher, counselor, or a principal, you're a mirror, all right? The kids are going to look at you and they're going to mirror what regulation, what emotion you have at the moment. I've seen it 100 times. We can't always control what comes at us, but we can control what reflects back and what comes out of us as well. That's our goal. So next time things feel tense, just pause and think, what energy am I feeding into right now? What is my, call it your aura if you want to. What are you giving off to your classroom, to the kid that's having that meltdown? Because the room or the student is always going to echo that back. And I think if you sit and stop for a minute and reflect, either maybe as a parent, as a teacher, as a principal, you can think right now about those times where you've caught yourself doing this, where the student has risen to your level, okay? Good or bad, because we're going to talk about both sides of that. You know, the idea of co-regulation is huge. You know, think about my calm is their calm. Kids borrow our calm before they can create their own. I think that's really interesting. I've seen it 100 times. A student on the edge of losing control and an adult either escalates or de-escalates the situation in the first 10 seconds. Okay, it happens very quickly. You can either get it diffused quickly or you can escalate it very quickly. And I will say sometimes it might just stay steady for a while and it doesn't get worse or better. It just kind of holds steady. And that's frustrating too, in a whole nother podcast probably. But it's not about the words. It's about the presence and what you are putting off in that presence. Sometimes I'll walk into a situation and not say a single word for the first minute or so. I just breathe, take a breath, get low, get down to their eye level, make that eye contact. And it's amazing how much tension can dissolve when you just stop feeding into it. I've seen it often where, I like that adults just kind of badger, and just push and push and push. And it just escalates to where it's out of control. But again, if you stay calm, take that breath, get them to take a breath. Hey, buddy, I need you to take a breath with me. Just breathe. Really calm. Make that eye contact. Have them make eye contact with you. Say, hey, look at me in the eyes for a minute. Listen to my voice right now. I'm really calm, almost whispering. Slow your speech down. It slows the room down. Lower your tone. It lowers the noise down that they're putting off. Move slower. It makes the space feel safer for the student. I had a student once, we'll just call him Marcus, let's say. That was not his name. He had a quick temper. If he felt disrespected, it was game over. That was it. Teachers did not like those kind of moments when it was over for Marcus. And one day he stormed out of a classroom. I can remember this. And I found him pacing in the hallway, breathing heavy. I didn't tell him to calm down. I didn't ask him what happened. Or what's wrong. I just said, hey buddy, I'm right here. We stood there for 5 minutes. It seemed like 5 minutes, both silent. And finally he said, I thought you were going to yell at me. I said, well, I thought about it, Marcus. I did. I thought about it. And then he kind of actually laughed. And that was the turning point, because in that silence, he realized I wasn't there to control him. I was there to connect with him and just, be there to support him in his moment of, whether anger, frustration, whatever it was. The best interventions aren't loud. They're not in your face. They're steady. I'm going to come back to that word later. They're steady. Most educators are probably familiar with CPI. It's kind of this packaged program. Crisis Prevention Institute is what it is. They talk a lot about de-escalation. They talk a lot about, actually they go into like safety and holds that you can do if you have to restrain kids, which is kind of the end, like you don't want to go there, but if it has to go there, they teach you how to do it the right way, the safe way, to keep you out of litigation and to keep kids from getting hurt and to keep you from getting hurt. But I really like their de-escalation strategies. It focuses on preventing and safely managing disruptive or aggressive behaviors through being calm, being respectful, and proactive type approaches. They focus a lot on, recognizing early warning signs in those kids that are having meltdowns. You notice the changes in behavior. Maybe it's their tone or their body language that suggests this rise in tension. Like you can look at a kid and you can see them physically changing the way their body is when they are upset or angry or frustrated in that building moment. They teach you to stay calm, professional, using that steady tone, a relaxed posture, not escalating the situation. They talk about controlled breathing and model your composure. Because again, remember, they're the mirror. They're going to reflect what they're getting. CPI talks about setting clear, simple limits, not giving the kids a lot of choice. It's, hey, look, I need you to do this, or you can do this. You can decide. These are your two choices. We don't give them 5 choices. 1, that's overwhelming. And 2, you got to have some boundaries, and they have to know that you are the one setting those boundaries. So simple limits, provide clear expectations, but give them choice so that they have some sense of control, because they're out of control most of the time in that moment. So if we can give them some sense of they're in control, we can do that. But again, keep it limited. CPI also talks about just maintaining your personal space for safety, like keeping a safe distance from the child or the person that's having a meltdown. Avoid threatening gestures or crowding, like crossing your arms even, or getting up in their space versus staying back and keeping calm and get that low tone. There's a lot of things, again, that we do that can poke the bear, so to speak. So why are we poking the bear? I've always said I can't consequence a behavior out of a kid. I can't yell a behavior out of a kid. I can't scare a behavior out of a kid, but I can relate and I can talk and we can communicate and we can build trust. And that's what will help de-escalate. We can't argue with them. We have to focus on reducing the tension rather than proving a point or enforcing compliance in that moment. I do think a lot of adults want to prove a point, or they don't want to be proven wrong, or they don't want the child to appear that they've gotten their way because that lets the child know that they've won. And I don't think it's about that at all. And it's where sometimes we as adults forget that. Just because we're de-escalating and, not arguing and not trying to win that argument, it's okay. Grown-ups, it's okay. They're not winning. They're not getting their way. Chances are, if a consequence is needed, it's still going to be given. But in that moment, we've got to de-escalate the situation. We've got to be able to be rational with each other, the kid and the adult, and come to some kind of calming common ground. CPI is also very good about what to do in the situation after the crisis or after the meltdown. There's a lot of support that they put into place there. Like debriefing is a big thing, and I love to debrief because that's the only way we get better at handling a certain situation, is talking about it afterwards. Like, hey, this happened. We did this really, really well, and good job on this, and you guys did a good job here, but I could have done this a little bit better, or hey, you could have done this a little bit differently. And next time, let's really think about that and bring that into the moment. So that post-crisis support is very, very important. It helps understand the triggers that may have led up to a certain event, but also maybe how we can prevent it from happening again next time. Basically, CPI strategies emphasize care, welfare, safety, and security for everyone involved. And those are the most important factors when these situations arise. We just, whatever we can do to calm the situation down, but like I said, to keep it from happening again or repeating is even more important in my mind. So let's talk about consistency now for just a minute, because consistency helps create safety in these moments. It's the unsung hero of any school culture. If we're talking about consistency in our procedures, in our rules, in our expectations, anytime we break away from what our norm is or being consistent is usually when you open yourself up to misbehaviors or meltdowns or things. Kids don't like change a lot. And so when we change it up on them or don't follow the procedures and rules, things get out of hand. Perfect example that comes to my mind right away. Anytime we have a guest teacher in the building who doesn't know the kids, doesn't know the classroom, doesn't know the teacher, doesn't know the rules and procedures of our school or that classroom, it becomes chaotic fast. And that's just a natural occurrence, unfortunately, because they don't know those things. Obviously, if the teacher leaves good plans and lessons and spells everything out, that helps a lot. But I'm always trying to tell my kids, when we have a guest teacher, they're not going to do the things like Mrs. H does. They don't know Mrs. H, and they don't know how she runs the classroom. So we have to be helpful in those moments, not chaotic. Kids may not say it, but they crave predictability. Okay, they need to know what version of you, the adult, that they're going to get on a day-to-day basis, and that's really hard to do. We are very unpredictable as adults sometimes. If you're the adult who's calm on Monday and short-fused on Tuesday and maybe excited on Wednesday and fatigued on Friday, they're going to spend more energy reading you than learning from you. All right, I think that's very important to think about. They're going to spend more time trying to figure out which Mrs. H am I getting today, or Mr. T, or Mrs. B, or whoever, than just being able to have you be predictable in your personality, your demeanor, and your emotions every day so that they can learn from you, which is what they are there to do. There's a difference between fairness and sameness. Fair means giving kids what they need, not necessarily the same thing every time, which is really important and hard for all of us and even kids to understand, in my opinion. I think about a student from a few years back. We'll call this one Lily this time. I like that name, Lily. Lily was a person that tested limits daily, pushed boundaries. She challenged authority, a lot of pushback. But we stayed consistent with Lily, and every consequence came with conversation, which is really important. Every mistake came with a restart, which is also really important. I can remember one day when Lily said, "Hey, you never give up, do you?" And I said, "No, not on you or not on any kid." And that's when I knew that she trusted me. We had built that. We had established that through that consistency. Consistency doesn't mean being robotic by any means. It means being reliable. Reliable adults make kids feel safe. And that's what Lily figured out quickly. She's like, okay, it's a safe place. You're a safe person. You don't give up on me. Not at all, Lily. We're always going to be here for you. So CPI also emphasizes that concept of consistency. It's critical to preventing and managing crisis behaviors effectively. According to CPI, consistency builds trust. So being predictable will feed into emotional safety. All of those things help reduce anxiety, both in us and the kids. And it also prevents the likelihood of escalation, which is all that we're about. We don't want to see an upset student escalate into something further to where they're going to hurt themselves or hurt us or hurt other people. It's so important, and that consistency helps so much with that. The key points about being consistent are expectations and responses. Being consistent in both our expectations and responses. So when staff respond in a predictable way to both positive or challenging behaviors, it doesn't matter if we're talking good or bad, the students, the individuals are going to learn what to expect and how to stay in control. A consistency across staff. All adults should use the same language, the same tone. And I know that's hard to do because we all have our own niche and thing that we want to bring into our classroom. But we have to have some level of consistency there. And it must be applied reliably to maintain that credibility. For me in our building, we have practiced for several years across different buildings consistent building procedures, like how we do things in the hallway, how we behave in the cafeteria, how we line up, how we walk, all those things. And again, teachers can put their spin on it. I get that, and I'm okay with that. But we want it to be the same from room to room, from year to year, because then we know. Kids just know what the expectations and the procedures are, and it's consistent. They can thrive in that situation. Consistency also means follow through. It means promised consequences. Like, I'm not just going to give you an idle threat. Like, I'm going to kick you off this bus, young man, if you don't start to straighten up. I used to have a bus driver that said those kind of things. I'm going to take you into Mr. T and he is going to fix this. And if you don't stop. But he never wrote the kid up, and he never followed through with those promised consequences. And he just continued to get the same kind of behavior out of kids. So promised consequences, whether it's positive or corrective, must be maintained every day. Same thing. Follow through, follow through, follow through. We need to have consistency in our calmness as well. When we remain composed and professional, every time we do that, it helps model that self-regulation to the student, to the child, and it also builds a safe environment and reinforces that safe environment, which again is what we want for the adults and the kids. In short, CPI teaches that inconsistent reactions create confusion, and it will also escalate behavior. So being consistent, being predictable, using predictable approaches will maintain that stability and trust that we want to keep with the child. So let's be honest for a moment here. Kids aren't the only ones that are learning at school. I mean, think about this. They watch how we treat each other, the adults, and this is really important too, because I've seen it as grown-ups. A lot of times we expect certain things out of our kids, but we don't model those same things as adults. Like I said, they watch how we treat each other, and they notice when the adults gossip. They notice when we roll our eyes at each other and when we lose our patience with each other, like conversations that happen in the hallway or in the cafeteria or on the playground. They notice those things. They also notice when we laugh together and when we give grace and when we apologize, which is important. So you got to think about that. They see both sides of the fence, positive and negative. The culture is written in a handbook. It's modeled. It's not written in a handbook. It's modeled in the moments that no one is grading. Okay? Think about that. It's modeled in the moments no one's grading. Building a culture in a school feeds right down into our students. When teachers ask, why won't these kids take responsibility? I sometimes have to stop and wonder to myself, do we show them what that ownership looks like? Are we modeling that to our kids? We can't just expect kids to show up and know what that responsibility or taking responsibility looks like. They sometimes don't have the right role models at home or don't have any role models at home. And I know we hear all the time, well, I've got to teach these kids math, reading, science, social studies. I can't teach them to be human beings too. Well, yes, we can, because we can model it. We don't have to teach it. We can just model it and show them what it looks like. And then they will take ownership of it. When we own up on our own mistakes as grown-ups and show that to kids, they learn what humility is and what it looks like and what it sounds like. When we apologize, they learn courage, because it does take a lot to apologize for something that we either said wrong or did wrong, whatever it may be. Owning up to that and apologizing, making it right, is the best thing that we can do, and it shows them that courage that it takes to do that. When we show joy, they learn belonging. They learn happiness. These are the things I try to check myself on most often. Like, how do I talk about students when they're not around? Do I talk about them differently when they're not around versus how they would be in front of me? Even adults, let's think about that for a minute. Do you talk about your peers the same as you would if they're standing right in front of you versus when they're not around? Check yourself on that for a second. How do I respond when staff vent? And this happens a lot. I encourage staff to come vent to me in the privacy of my four walls in my office. We'll shut the door. I said, you can come in here and you can scream, you can cry, you can cuss, as long as it's not directly at me. But I would rather them do that with me, where I can help de-escalate that situation and work through it, versus to another teacher or another peer in the building and have a bigger issue where maybe a disciplinary action needs to take place or a write-up. I encourage teachers all the time. My office is a safe place. I tell kids that too. Yep, it's the place where consequences get handed out a lot of times. But again, it's a safe place, and it needs to be a safe place. So, how do we respond when staff vent is really important as well. And how do I show gratitude? We have to show more gratitude to each other, to our students. And, November is, to me, the month of gratitude and generosity. Generosity is actually our life skill this month, but I also like gratitude as well, because we have to be gracious and show gratitude towards each other for the things that we do for one another. Because the way adults treat adults becomes the blueprint for how kids treat each other. Like I said, they're the mirrors. I'm going to keep saying that over and over and over again. Adults must model the behavior that they want to see in students. The philosophy, in my mind, is grounded in the idea that behavior influences behavior. Students often mirror that emotional tone and conduct of the grown-ups around them. So some things that you can help about modeling good behavior for kids, to me, calm is contagious. So when adults stay composed and they're respectful, even in those tense moments, it helps de-escalate the students' emotions in those moments. Being professional and having that professional demeanor really matters. Your tone of voice, your body language, and your facial expressions should communicate safety and respect, but also control. You're still in control. Think about modeling self-regulation. Again, we talked about that earlier in this episode. Being self-regulated, adults that demonstrate how to pause, how to breathe, and respond with some thought. That will help teach students how to do the same thing as well. We are who they're learning from. So again, if we're not regulated, if we're not calm, if we're not thoughtful and respectful, how would we expect them to be? Respect breeds respect. Treating students with dignity, even in those correcting moments, when we're correcting behavior, we've got to have dignity and respect. It encourages students to reciprocate that respect back to us. Okay. And that's a lot easier at the primary level than it is at middle school level. I get that. Or even high school level. That students really cling to that feeling of being disrespected in the moment of correction or punishment or consequences. So it's a fine line, and you've got to hold on to that respect, breeding respect mentality, because if we treat them with some dignity and respect, it will reciprocate. We always have to lead by example. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. Consistently showing patience, fairness, empathy, all of that reinforces the behavioral norms expected in the environment that we want to create. So, all of this teaches the students to take cues from how adults act, not just what we say. So we have to model being calm. We have to model being respectful. We have to model consistent behavior, because it's the most powerful ways that we can use to de-escalate kids. Those are the biggest tools that we have in our toolbox. Being calm, being respectful, being consistent in our behavior, our actions, our thoughts, our words. Those are the things that will help in the moments of escalation to keep kids regulated and to de-escalate those moments. Whew. I just thought this episode was really important. We've talked a lot over many episodes about student behavior, because obviously that's a big component of teaching and school and learning. And just kind of coming off the episode of 210 with my dad and knowing the kind of moral compass he had and the kind of person he was, it reminded me a lot of these things that we need to do, because these were the things he did. He was, I wouldn't say he was always regulated. When Brad was little and he made a mistake, I didn't want Dad to fix it certain ways. Sometimes my brother and I were talking this week about how Mom would say, just wait till your dad gets home. Wait till Dad gets home. He's going to take care of this. And we knew it was torture waiting for Dad to get home sometime, because we knew it was not going to be good. We didn't want to disappoint either of our parents, but when we did, unfortunately, because that's what kids do, there were consequences and we had to live up to them. But Dad did a really good job of doing these things that we just, being calm, being respectful, being consistent. We knew where we lied with Mom and Dad most times, and we knew if we did X, Y was going to happen. So it was all good. And that's kind of where this episode led up to, is on the heels of last week and me working through the grieving process, which, obviously continues, and we're working through it, and I'm in a good place right now. And I know, Dad's watching down on me, probably on this episode, giving me a critique from above. But yeah, we're just going to keep moving forward. And let's move right into some rapid fire questions. One moment when I didn't handle a situation well, and what did it teach me? I mentioned this a few weeks ago, and I can't remember what the episode was off the top of my head, but when I was at the middle school and I had an emotionally disabled student having a pretty big meltdown, and, I was trying to use sarcasm with that student and try to defuse the situation, and it really misfired on me to where he said, F you, Mr. T. And, sometimes sarcasm in certain situations works great. This one, not so much. And it did teach me, you can't use that all the time, and you have to be really thoughtful of when it works, because when it doesn't work, it's going to backfire big time like it did there. So be cautious of when you use sarcasm and how you use it with kids and grown-ups too. It works the same way. One phrase that helps me reset when things get tense or uptight. I just think about this, like the kids, they're not giving me a hard time. They're having a hard time. I think that's the most important thing. So yeah, it might feel like they're giving you a hard time, but it's because they're having a hard time. So maybe if you frame it that way, it might help you have a better understanding of how to handle the situation when things get tense and why it's tense. They're just having a hard time. So help them get through that hard time. A student who reminded me to be better. I won't just say one student, but I think there's been many situations where students have taught me that silence can speak louder than control. Like sometimes it's better not to say anything than to sometimes we catch ourselves rambling and rambling and rambling. We're trying to diffuse a situation. And sometimes if we just take a minute and we don't say a word, like we talked about at the beginning of this episode, and we just use that silence, give them a chance to breathe and get refocused a little bit. Even that silence is what kind of stuns them back for a minute and gets them restarted and refocused and allows them to have a conversation. So just think about that moment of silence and how it can speak louder than anything else. A staff member who modeled calm under pressure. I'll give a big shout out to Ken Davis, who was one of my ED teachers through the years back at Wolcott Mills Elementary School. Ken was amazing and is still amazing as an emotional disability teacher. His calmness, his demeanor, his body, he emulates anything through CPI that you could learn. He actually was an instructor for CPI for many years. He probably still does, but he could remain unshaken when kids are spinning upside down, throwing things in the room. And to be able to handle the things that he did in that calmness like he did not react. He did not overreact. He just kept that calm voice, calm actions. Did he restrain kids in the moment when needed? Absolutely, for safety purposes only. But again, he was probably the epitome of being calm under pressure. So good job, Ken Davis. I've learned a lot of things from you in those situations. What's one word that describes the kind of adult I want to be in my school? I said I would come back to it later in the episode, and the word is steady. Because steady adults are what really change school and what keeps school in a safe place for each other. So remember to be steady. Stay steady, my friends. So as we wrap this up, here, in my opinion, is the truth. If we want regulated kids and students, we need regulated adults. Plain and simple. And that's hard sometimes. It is hard for the adults to remain regulated. But if we want the kids to be regulated and de-escalated, then we have to do the same thing. Everything in a school flows through our adult energy. Think about that. Our school culture is the adult energy in the building. So if you have a toxic culture, chances are you have some toxic adults in the building. And it only takes one to create that toxic culture. So whatever you can do as a leader and as a staff to work together to keep things high energy, high positivity. I know we can't do that 100% of the time. Things get hard and we get wore down, but keep that energy level high because everything flows through it and our kids see that. Our tone, our consistency, our grace, it either builds safety or it breaks it and causes chaos. So this week, while you're at school or the week ahead, notice what you bring to the building, to your room. It's not about your title as a teacher, an administrator, a counselor. It's not about your lesson plans. It's going to be about your energy. What energy are you going to bring this week to your building, your classroom, your students? What's the energy? Because in the end, classrooms don't need perfect adults. I mean, it would be nice, but it's not a perfect world. They need adults that are present every single day, that consistent, present adult. So think about that as you go into your week next week. And what energy is it that you can bring to your classroom, to your kids? I'm Brad, your host of Interventions and Detentions. I appreciate you joining us every week, tuning in. Don't forget to check us out on social media. Give us some likes, give us some comments. Give me some ideas for upcoming episodes that you'd like to hear about. We've got more guests being scheduled as we speak. Scheduling can be hard sometimes to get those grown-ups on here, but we're working on it. So stay tuned. Tune in. Every Friday morning at 8 a.m. is when our episodes drop. Again, it's been Brad from Interventions and Detention. Thanks for tuning in. It's where the real learning begins. See you next time.